Hello and welcome to the Big Ideas Art Studio. My name is Nicole and I am a full-choice elementary art teacher embracing the teaching for artistic behavior philosophy of art education. And in this video, I want to address one of the biggest fears that occurs when a teacher is thinking about transitioning to a choice-based art education. And that fear is, what happens when a kid doesn't want to do anything? So I'm going to give you 5 tips or tricks that you can use in your classroom whenever you find a student hesitant or just not really interested or disengaged in your art program, not willing to work. So make sure you stick around for the last tip because it's a little bit controversial, especially in the art education community, but I found a lot of success with it. So the first thing I want to mention before I dive into this list is kids are built to learn. They want to learn. They're naturally curious and it's part of human nature to inquire. So assume that the majority of your students are going to find something that interests them and the majority of your students will be fully engaged in your art program. So with that being said, there will be students from time to time who are disengaged or who are not working in your classroom. And what I want you to remember when that happens is that the majority of the time, the student is feeling vulnerable or fearful in some way. Remember, it can be really, really scary to put yourself out there, to create a work of art, and to have to come up with your own ideas. A lot of kids aren't used to that, especially in a traditional school setting, when most of the time students are in the habit of following directions. So that leads me to tip number 1. So the first tip I have for you is to make it normal to not have an idea. So a lot of times kids aren't working or aren't engaged in the art making process because they're not sure what to do or they don't have an idea. So make it a normal thing for them to seek information or do some research. So have an area in your classroom set up where they can go and they can look at books or pictures or resources, a place where they can really gather information and gather ideas for their next art project. So the first tip is to make it normal and also to give that child a little bit of space. Sometimes they just need to know that it's okay that they aren't actively in the idea generation mode or the art making mode. And that's normal, right? So artists aren't always coming up with ideas and they aren't always working. Sometimes artists need space to allow the ideas to flow. So the second thing that you can do is have a conversation with that student and try to build a relationship with them. Making the student feel safe in your classroom is absolutely imperative for moving forward, and giving them that safety will help them dive into the art making process in the future. So building a relationship, making them feel safe, have a conversation and see if you can find out some of their interests or hobbies and collect some resources based on those interests and hobbies. Bring them into the classroom, share them with the student and see if that's helpful in providing them with some ideas or inspiration for art making. So the other thing that you can do is invite that student to observe other students. Tell them to go on a walk around the classroom and just see if they can gather information and ideas from looking at other kids' work and seeing other kids in the art making process. A lot of times I've noticed that when I do that, that student will jump in and help another student in their process and working on their art project. And that's important too. They're gonna learn a lot by working with somebody else. Even if it's not their own original idea, there's a lot to be learned by helping and by gathering materials and by seeing another student in the art making process. So invite them to observe others. So the next tip I have for you is to get creative in what you're offering as a choice for your students. So make sure that you have a lot of 2D and 3D offerings, and then also maybe you have to think outside the box a little bit. I've had in the past a lot of students who were disengaged, and then I found out that they weren't visual artists, that a lot of them like actually to write more. So you can set up little mini writing centers. I've also noticed that a lot of students are drawn to digital media these days. So don't be afraid to download some apps that would be engaging for young artists. Don't be afraid to really get creative in what you consider an art media. So my last tip for you is a little bit controversial. It can be kind of a hot topic in the art education community, but the very last thing I do, if all else fails, is I teach the disengaged kiddo how to trace. I know it seems like cheating, however, I think there are a lot of pros to tracing. It's really a great stepping stone for getting that disengaged kid involved in the art making process. It's non-threatening, right? There's really no way to mess it up once you teach them how it works. Plus, there's a lot of skill involved and a lot of skills that are developed when a student is learning how to trace. So of course, you want to have a conversation with them about tracing and what it means to create your own authentic work, and how tracing is sometimes just a tool that artists use when they're creating their own work. So I do always mention that when you trace something, it's not something that we can display in the hallway, it's not something we're going to claim as our own, but it's merely a tool to use to learn how to draw, and it's a tool that you can use for art making in general. So the last thing I want to mention is, when you notice disengaged kiddos in your classroom, please don't think that it means something is wrong with your choice program. It's actually quite the opposite. When I first started, I really took it to heart and thought that it meant that my program wasn't successful. But now I know it's actually quite the opposite, because you're requiring students to step outside of their comfort zone and to think in a whole new way. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions on helping disengage kiddos in the classroom, please leave them in the comments and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Or if you're a choice teacher already and you have suggestions, please leave those in the comments too, so that we can continue to help each other grow. Also, please make sure to like and subscribe and share this video with anyone who you think might benefit. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.